Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our presentation of Chapter 6, which is Leading with Integrity and Moral Purpose. So, the members of my team are myself, which is Arissa, Caitlin, and Afia. This is just a breakdown of the things that we will be discussing today. Okay, so in this chapter, we will discuss the process of creating and sustaining ethical organizational environments, analyze the moral dimensions of transformational leadership theory, and examine how participants influence their organizations ethically through behavior modeling. So, before we jump right in, does anybody know what is integrity and moral purpose? Yes, anybody? No? Okay. So integrity. Integrity refers to honesty, strong moral principles, and consistent adhesion to ethical standards, even in challenging situations. It involves aligning actions with values, maintaining transparency, and upholding trustworthiness. According to Peterson and Solomon, integrity is the ability to act in accordance with one's beliefs and values, even when faced with external pressures. Moral purpose. Moral purpose is the commitment to act in ways that serve the greater good, guided by ethical values and a sense of social responsibility. It reflects a leader's dedication to making decisions that benefit individuals and society as a whole. Fullman defines the moral purpose as acting with the intention of making a positive difference in the lives of others and in society. Okay, so let's talk about creating and sustaining an ethical organizational environment. So, understanding and applying ethical theories, organizational values, and personal moral development helps sustain ethical workplaces. Nash identifies four key qualities for advancing ethics in organizations. One, critical thinking to assess dilemmas. Two, integrity to uphold ethical standards. Three, empathy to consider each other's perspectives. And four, motivation to act ethically. When applying ethical decision-making models, leaders must be prepared for criticism, resistance, and even a membership decline. Not everyone in an organization prioritizes ethical actions. Some may choose convenience, cost saving, or the path of least resistance. Effective leadership involves clearly explaining the issue and the reasoning behind decisions. Nash emphasizes that personal courage is crucial in making ethical choices for the greater good. These four leadership qualities, when put into action, contribute to building an ethical organizational environment. Identifying ethical issues and involving others in decision making further reinforces this culture. Establishing and maintaining an ethical climate requires intentional strategies and interventions, incorporating the principles of the rational relational leadership model and knowing, being, doing framework. All members, including leaders, should be empowered to create an ethical climate based on shared values that guide actions and decisions. A common purpose helps align principles, and everyone is responsible for holding each other accountable and engaging in ethical dialogue. Relying on one leader to handle ethics is less effective than having all members involved in fostering what's right. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about a company called Enron. So let's contrast with the organizational climate of Enron, a corporation whose detailed 64-page code of ethics document was eventually sold on eBay. I'm sure everybody might have saw stuff on eBay, so you should be familiar with what eBay is. And with a one-word description on unopened. In the early 2000s, the Enron board waived many of its ethics policies, including allowing Andrew Foster, its CEO, to work for Enron and another entity in what was a conflict of interest for a company. Okay, on the right, you'll see a picture of the CEO who I just spoke about. After the collapse of the company, the board noted that the exception should have been a red flag the size of Alaska, meaning very big. The Enron case exemplifies toxic leadership, where the company's detailed ethics code was ignored, leading to a disastrous collapse. Despite having a comprehensive ethics document, Enron's board waived its policies, such as allowing conflicts of interest, which should have been seen as a major warning sign. This demonstrates that leadership can be ineffective or unethical, as described. Who divides bad leadership into effective and unethical categories? Ineffective leaders may fail to achieve goals but still maintain ethical integrity, while unethical leaders cannot distinguish right from wrong. So, Newman describes toxic leaders as those whose destructive behaviors cause serious harm to followers and organizations. Toxic leaders often exhibit traits such as self-serving ambition, arrogance, and a disregard for the impact of their actions on others. They may mislead followers and exploit their fears for personal gain. These toxic behaviors can corrupt an organization's culture if not checked, making it crucial for leaders to model ethical behavior and hold themselves accountable. Recognizing and rewarding ethical behavior, such as taking risks to do the right thing, can promote a positive organizational culture. However, unethical behavior must be addressed, not through public humiliation, but through accountability measures that protect confidentiality and ensure due process. Leaders and members share the responsibility to confront ethical violations and uphold the organization's values. Moral purpose as an act of courage. So, personal courage is essential for doing the right thing. Greg Lavoie compares integrity to stone sculpting. A true stone rings clearly when struck, while a dull tone indicates flaws. Ethical leadership requires moral courage, defined by Kidder as the ability to face ethical challenges confidently without retreating. Moral courage involves principles, danger, and endurance, as seen in Nelson Mandela's 18 years of imprisonment for opposing apartheid. It requires the willingness to endure hardship, such as losing friends or jobs, to uphold one's principles and act with integrity. Assumptions about ethical leadership. There are several assumptions about ethical leadership which are essential for both effective and ethical leadership. Lucas and Anilio outline 8 such assumptions. 1. Ethics is the heart of leadership. Effective leadership is not just about achieving goals, but also about following ethical processes. Leadership with integrity justifies its means by the positive impact on the ends. 2. All leadership is values driven. Leadership should reflect ethical values, with leaders and participants bringing their personal beliefs on right and wrong into the organization. Organizations are shaped by these values, not neutral entities. Personal values intersect with organizational values. Ethical leadership begins with self-reflection on personal values and how they connect with the values of the organization. This alignment guides ethical decision making. 4. Ethical leadership can be learned. Through experience, reflection, and application, leaders can learn ethical decision making. Life experiences and reflection on past actions can shape one ethical understanding. 5. Ethical leadership involves a connection between ethical thought and action. Ethical leadership is about connecting moral reasoning with action. The goal is not just to understand ethical theories, but to apply them to real-world situations. 6. Character development is an essential ingredient of ethical leadership. A leader's character is revealed through their actions, not just their stated values. Leaders must align their actions with their exposed values to earn respect and trust. 7. Ethical leadership is a shared process. Everyone in an organization shares the responsibility for ethical leadership. Ethical decision making should be inclusive, with leaders and members working together to uphold core values. 8. Role modeling teaches ethical behavior. Leaders influence the ethical climate through their actions. Role modeling behaviors teaches others what is acceptable, as seen when leaders prioritize diversity or ethical recruitment practices. So these assumptions emphasize that ethical leadership is a continual process of self-reflection, alignment of values, and shared responsibility along all members of an organization. Leading with moral purpose requires reflecting on your ethical beliefs, distinguishing between good and bad leadership, and navigating conflicts between your values and those of your organization. The goal is not to find easy answers, but to engage in ethical analysis and use moral imagination to solve dilemmas. Cultural assumptions. Ethics exist in a cultural context. They are culturally bound or culture specific. There is no universal agreement on what behaviors or practices are considered appropriate, legal, ethical, or moral across cultures. Ethical standards can differ by country and evolve, meaning it could be one thing today and the next thing tomorrow. So, for instance, practices such as the oppression of women in Saudi Arabia are considered ethical and legal there, but are seen as unethical in the United States of America. Similarly, segregation, once legally accepted in the USA, meaning we separating the black from the white, mhm, um, is now regarded as unethical and illegal. These shifts often result from changing laws, especially in business contexts. While some argue for universal moral values, scholars like Kidder identify common values such as love, truth, fairness, and justice that transcend cultures. Though these values may be applied differently, the core principles are similar across societies. Anthropological studies highlight how moral views and practices can vary not only between cultures but also within them. For example, many American women, perceive the Muslim practice of wearing the veil or the hijab or what we call it here as sexist, while it is culturally accepted in many Muslim societies. This reflects the lack of global moral consensus, with differences appearing not only between nations, but within them as well. Cultural tolerance involves acknowledging these differences without imposing on culture's beliefs on another. Cultural relativism encourages understanding cultural practices on their own terms rather than judging them as right or wrong.
Ethical theories and moral purposes. The study of human behavior as it relates to ethics date back to the philosophers Aristotle, Plato, as well as the scholars Immanuel Kant and George Stuart Mill. Each of these persons are depicted below. Just for a quick overview, Plato's view on ethics, his view on ethics was based on the belief that ethical behaviors are independent of human opinion, and he considers moral principles like justice and accountability to be objectively true and not just a social construct. Next. Y'all hearing me?
Yes, we are. I
Oh,
think this girl's Wi-Fi is giving her problems. That's why it's taking so long to change. Yeah, see, there it goes. Oh.
ethical theories provide a glimpse into how human judgments are made and individual thought processes to solve ethical dilemmas and other problems. Transformational leadership theory is the foremost theory that incorporates a moral component as its foundation for leadership. James McGregor Burns said that transformational leadership is a process in which leaders and followers raise one another to higher levels and motivation. Burns believed that transforming leadership breaches moral dimensions when leaders and participants' behavior and ethical aspirations are elevated by mutual influence on one another. Transforming leadership involves a desire to change things, and it's a mutually influential relationship between leaders and participants. If we look at the picture to the right, um, transformational leadership is a departure from traditional and reactive management styles. Transformational leadership provides a proactive and engaging way to inspire happy and productive teams. It compromises four key elements: inspirational motivation, individual consideration, idealized influence, and intellectual stimulation. And under each of these four elements are ways in which these elements are expressed. Values or ideals such as peace, justice, fairness, liberty, and equal opportunity, and people's general welfare are expressed by transformational leaders. Burns label these ideals as end values, and end values are the ultimate ends or the goals that individuals or groups or a team and an organization are working to achieve, as we stated above, such as peace, justice, and liberty, and general the general welfare of people. Those are values or ideals that we are continuously working towards as a society. The leader's fundamental act is to induce people to be aware or conscious of what they feel, to feel their true needs so strongly, to define their values so meaningfully that they can move to purposeful action. So initially, it means that the leaders encourage their members, their participants in their team to figure out what their values are, what are their end values, and work towards achieving it, taking purposeful action towards achieving their end values. Caitlin, you want me to try share it?
Yeah, I think that might be a better idea actually. Um,
Not even, let's see. Are you all see my screen?
yes, we are.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So transforming leadership theory is about the relationship and influence between leaders and followers. Burns described this symbiotic relationship as an interaction of power and shared values. The moral purpose of both leaders and participants are the key factors in the transforming leadership process. Change results from these shared moral purposes. Tichy and Devana use 7 characteristics to characterize transforming leaders. 2 of these relate to ethical and moral dimensions of leadership. These are courageousness and value driven. Courageous leadership transforming leaders dare to confront reality even if it is painful, and have healthy egos to withstand peer pressure. Possessing positive self-esteem is a necessary element of leading with moral purpose. This is the opposite of leading to win popularity by needing to be liked by others. So transforming leaders that possess courageousness, they do not need to please others to win their favor. They do what is right, regardless of if it's not the most popular thing. And an example of this is the president of the senior council decided to follow her school's alcohol policy and not permit members to take cases of beer on the spring break trip, although the membership had unanimously voted to take alcohol on the trip. In this case, the president decided to do what was right despite popular sentiment and knowing that most people would be upset with her decision. So she was courageous enough to do the right thing and not the popular thing. Value-driven. Transformational leaders are also value-driven. They have a core set of values that are consistent with their actions. A leader can inspire others to higher levels of morality through influence and modeling behaviors that become standard to others, standard for standard for others to follow. And these values can be a standard for others to follow through modeling. These are the core values that develop a person's characteristic or reputation. Some examples of these core values are integrity, accountability, compassion, and respect. Modeling a moral purpose. If participants admire or identify with another member or leader, they would be more likely to imitate that person's behavior. This is known as the social learning theory. This theory provides a framework for understanding how individuals learn from others. Bandura, the pioneer of the social learning theory, postulated that people can learn indirectly from observing or by vicarious learning. Behavior modeling by leaders and participants offer vicarious learning stimulus in organizational settings. Exemplars or models in organizations can elicit ethical or unethical behavior and significantly influence ethical decision making. So we depict Albert Bandura on the right, and as we just said, the social learning theory was proposed by him, and he believed that direct reinforcement, which is either rewarding a good behavior or punishing a bad behavior to encourage it by rewarding it or discourage it by punishing it, could not account for all types of learning. This theory added a social element, arguing that people can learn new information and behaviors by watching other people, which is known as observational learning or modeling. So now we'll look at a couple of examples explaining the social learning theory in different settings. A student president of the Latino Student Union who wants everyone in the organization to feel empowered will practice sharing power and authority with leaders and members and will create opportunities for members to make meaningful contributions to the organization. Through observing the president, other organizational leaders empower committee and chair members and involve them in the decision-making process. Vicarious learning or behavior modeling has important implications for the leadership process. Organizational and community members can learn ethical practices by observing those who model these practices in their leadership approaches. Another example, and when a football coach benches the star player for violating a rule, even though the coach needs that player to clinch the final game, organizational and team members learn from this experience by observing how a peer is treated and that negative consequences result from negative behavior or bad behavior. Sims and Lorenzi refer to this phenomena as outcome expectation. Participants also might infer the leader possesses a high degree of integrity and is motivated to do the right thing. The behavior of the leader or the coach in this example influences the team members to act ethically because this is what is reinforced, because they want to avoid punishment for unethical behavior, or both. And the final example, participants also model behavior that inspires leaders' ethical awareness. So the members of a student-owned food co-op influence the student manager to use empathy in deciding whether to dismiss an employee who missed 3 days of work to care for his ill and elderly grandmother. The members asked the manager to consider the fact that the employee was putting himself through school and he was the only relative that could take care of his grandmother. They suggested that the manager revise the work schedule to allow the employee time to help his grandmother and still maintain some hours at work. In this example, the members were modeling how empathy could be used by putting themselves in the employee's situation, realizing what the impact of dismissal would be on the employee. Another form of modeling is when leaders or participants engage in discussions of ethical issues or bring up ethical dilemmas that can be resolved through an exchange of multiple perspectives. Moral talk. How often have you found yourself in an organizational meeting or in a classroom in which someone raises ethical or moral questions around a particular issue your group is working on? It is often hard to know how to approach a conversation about moral questions. Leaders and participants would benefit by engaging in conversations that allow people to explore the moral complexities and dimensions of problems or dilemmas. Blade and Waters provided an interesting notion of modeling or influencing ethical behavior through verbal exchange, which is also known as moral talk or dialogic leadership. What is dialogic leadership? It is all about leaders engaging in open conversation and collaborative decision making instead of handing down decisions from one eye. The dialogic leader initiates discussions with peers and members about what is ethical and what the material interests of individuals are. Dialogic leadership or moral talk can be used in student organizations to model ethical approaches and to help create and sustain an ethical environment. An example of moral talk is a student president of an honor society includes on the meeting agenda a discussion of the nature of the group's test files. A member speaks up at the meeting about her concerns that a few exam files have been stolen. She then asks members if maintaining these files is the kind of activity the group should engage in, knowing that this is a violation of the college's honor code. Discussion ensues about whether the activity is counter to the organization's mission and the organization's values of academic excellence and integrity. So unfortunately, not individuals often hesitate to participate in moral talk or discussions about ethical dilemmas. Although the topic of ethics is encountered by individual leaders and participants, little discourse about ethics have taken place among group members. This lack of discussion about ethics is referred to as moral muteness. Reasons for this include avoidance of complex problems with moral overtones, protection of positional leaders, managerial flexibility in solving problems, and avoidance of dealing with varying ideological or moralistic perspectives, all of which potentially inhibit the problem-solving process. It is the shared responsibility of members and leaders to initiate moral talk and avoid moral muteness. So I don't know if you all can remember the class when Sir had asked us about what our views on abortion. I can personally say I exercise moral muteness, even though I have my own moralistic perspectives. I think it's something that I would rather keep to myself. And if it was a problem that we had or we were trying to solve an issue, I would have inhibited the problem solving process. Moral expressions have the potential to arouse feelings of connection with moral action. For the modeling effect to occur, the language in moral talk must relate to experiences and expectations of people involved in the organization. Moral talk can be used as a type of modeling influence when dialogue is used to identify problems, consider issues, advocate and criticize policies, and justify and explain decisions. Leaders and participants can use moral talk to influence others carefully consider their perspectives and positions on issues.
Okay. Excuse me. I had to join on my phone. Is everybody hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So now we reach to the ethical decision-making models. So the leadership process involves resolving ethical dilemmas and problems that cannot be easily solved. Addressing these dilemmas and confronting unethical behavior is not solely the leader's responsibility. The relational leadership model, which emphasizes inclusive and process oriented leadership to achieve results for the common good, suggests that leaders and members both participate in resolving ethical dilemmas. So, when addressing ethical dilemmas, leaders and participants must be thoughtful, they must be demanding, compassionate, intentional, and consultative.
Go ahead, don't worry.
Okay. To the next slide, there are several methods for handling moral quandaries. Using a professional code of conduct may be necessary in some circumstances. So, for instance, the standards maintained by their respective professional associations serve as guidelines for the professional conduct of physicians and lawyers. Professionals in this field of religion and counseling are expected to strictly respect client confidentiality unless the client poses a risk of harm to themselves or others. Numerous have non-discrimination and sexual harassment policies that serve as behavioral guidelines. Rituals in sororities and fraternities act as declaration of the organization's ideals and standards. Students may adhere to an honor code when taking tests in a class. Ethics isn't a tidy concept, just like leadership. So, the use of organizational standards or professional codes is not always appropriate. Even identifying whether a situation is an ethical dilemma or something else, such as a personality conflict between two members, requires human judgment and analysis. So imagine this scenario. You attend a college that has a strict academic honor code calling for community members to turn in anyone who violates the code. You are also the president of the Interfraternity Council. During an exam, you notice that your fraternity brother, who is also your best friend, one of your best friends, cheating from another classmate. How do you go about confronting this situation? Do you follow the honor code and turn in your fraternity brother into the judicial office, or do you try after the exam to persuade him not to cheat in the future because you will have to turn him in and it would look bad for your fraternity? Or do you begin to initiate a decision making process that will guide you from the stage of interpreting the situation? If I respond in a certain way, how will it affect others? Or do you do nothing, acting without moral purpose? Could anybody tell me, in this situation, or if you ever been in this situation, what would you do or what have you done? Anybody?
What usually works for me and my brothers is we have this thing called the three strike rule. So if you screw up once, you'll get a second chance. If you screw up the second time, sure. But if the
Mm-hmm.
third time, then you will have to pursue necessary authorities.
Oh, but again, a lot of chances. Okay. Well, that's.
Honestly, Caitlin,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of like if you're working for a company and normally like they give you like three warning letters and then after that is like termination. I think that's like a similar thing that they have there going on.
Oh, yeah. I understand.
So, so for me, I would say I am letting you know that I am going to tell on you. So, in
One
advance,
time?
I'm going. Yes, I am going to tell on you because I sat down and I did my test fair and square and you was cheated. So I'm letting you know, best
Oh,
friend or not.
okay, okay. Anybody else would like to
Can I
share?
pose a question?
Yeah, sure.
So Euclid, right? Let me say that your best friend had some home circumstances that he didn't get to study for the test last night, and he saw opportunity that would allow him to pass. And let me say that his grade or this grade is an important grade. Let me say a 50% exam, right? Would
Mm-hmm.
you still pursue necessary authorities, knowing that he had a difficult situation at home that you can deal with?
Um, I mean,
The
let
question
it
is for me.
slide. It's for, I'm not sure who it's for.
Yeah, Euclid, or whoever said that they
Oh,
would
you can.
Yeah.
Sorry.
one time,
Yes, Nicklon, I would still tell on
even
him.
knowing that even knowing that what he went through at
It
home.
dep- hmm. So now I'm going to contradict myself, Nicklon.
Right.
It had to be something very drastic that happened. But
Let
I
me
would
just say
I
for
would
worst
tell.
case scenario that he have a terminally ill family member and his father is not in the picture or they are not appearing in the picture. And he working like let me say a job to keep food on the table. He had to look out for his younger sibling or they have to look out for their younger sibling.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you make a decision to go to school to study. So we all have issues going on. So I would say I would still take the same course I was taking before. It may sound harsh, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, you cannot playing like that. You right is right. Somebody had raised their hand just now. You all wanted to see anything, or can I go ahead?
Not just gonna agree with you, Dean. That regardless of the circumstances, I would still inform the right people.
Mm, okay. So thank you for your responses. Okay, so now we are on to the next slide. So ethical decision making models encourage people to work through dilemmas with a moral purpose in mind and provide frameworks with which to guide decision making and analysis. Rather than react quickly to dilemmas, you should carefully consider various steps, including ethical analysis, toward making sound decisions. So, Keda defines tough choices as those that pit one right value against another. So, the tough choices then do not center upon right versus wrong, they involve right versus right. So, at the side, there you see a picture of a traffic light. So, next time you're probably in a situation like this, you can remember the traffic light and we see red, which is stop. You're going to stop and you're going to pause, take a deep breath, avoid the urge to act on impulse, which we are human beings, we always act without thinking. But, anyways, we're going to pause, take a deep breath, and avoid the urge to act. Next, we're going to think. We're going to identify the problem, identify the choices we have, and then we're going to determine which choice will be the better choice. And then act, which is green. We are going to proceed with the best choice, be mindful, pause and make changes if something is not working or if it is not safe for you or others. Okay? So they are genuine dilemmas precisely because each side of the problem is firmly rooted in one of our basic core values. So an ethical dilemma then is one of those right versus right situations in which two core moral values come into conflict to distinguish such dilemmas from the right versus wrong issues that produce moral temptations. So we have some core values, which we would have learned before: integrity, fairness, learning, discipline, balance, results, partnership. All of these are core values. Right? So KEDA 2005 provides a framework for examining right versus right choices using a four dilemma paradigm model. So justice versus mercy, meaning we have fairness and equity, conflict with passion, empathy, and love. Then two, we have short term versus long term. Um, we have immediate needs run counter to future goals. Three, we have individual versus community. This is self versus others, or small group versus larger groups. And four, we have truth versus loyalty. This is where honesty competes with commitment, responsibility, or promise keeping. So these dilemma paradigms represent values that collide with each other. So the 2005 death of Terry Sechiavo, who was kept on life support for nearly 15 years after collapsing in her home and never regaining consciousness, represented a legal case in which the values of justice and mercy clashed. The dilemma reached into a public debate about the moral and legal rights of life and death. So we have a picture of Terry and her condition. Um, and well, a picture of her at the bottom, kind of blurred out of when she was younger. So she couldn't help herself basically. She was on life support for 15 years. And so, yeah, we go to the next slide. So another form of dilemma paradigm was featured in the Elian Gonzalez case that began on Thanksgiving Day 1999. Elian was a local Cuban boy whose mother sought to smuggle him into the United States via boat. However, she died at sea, but Elian survived. His relatives in Florida battled to keep him there despite the wishes of his biological father, who was not Elian's legal caretaker when his parents were divorced. So the principle of justice and mercy in individual and community collided as the quandary snowballed into political issues between Cuba and the United States. An illustration of a conflict between loyalty and truth occurred in April 1996 when David Kaczynski turned in his brother, Theodore Kaczynski, to the police on suspicion of being the Unabomber, the man who killed or permanently injured numerous people by sending bombs through the mail for more than 20 years. David Kaczynski is an example of a brave person who did what he thought was right and honest. He did so at the excruciating cost of knowing that if proven guilty, his brother would face a harsh punishment, possibly even the death penalty. So he did the right thing, basically, right? Because his brother was a murderer. Crazy. And then we have David Kaczynski acted in mental distress because he wanted to believe his brother was not a Unabomber. This incident highlights the tremendous human battle that happens when the ideals of truth and loyalty clash, or when the values of individual or community collide. The greater right value affected David Kaczynski's decision. So consider, if you had a family member, question, okay, guys? If you had a family member or close friend to the FBI, if you suspected them of being a Unabomber, would you report your father to the police? Oh, sorry, yeah. Two questions. Yeah. So consider, if you had a family member or close friend to the FBI and you suspected them of being a Unabomber, would you report your family member to the police if he robbed a bank or if he was a Unabomber? Or what if your mother struck a pedestrian and fled on the scene of the accident? Which of the values would you choose and act on? Yes, Nikran.
In this case, I would believe the only course of action is to report said crime, even if it's a harm level, because if you don't report it and truth comes to light, then you are guilty
Mm-hmm.
by association or you're guilty because you knew what the person did and you said nothing.
You are
So in
right.
that
But what if
case,
it was your mother or your father?
well, right, and in that
You
case,
would
it's still
still.
the same issue because yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just affecting one person. You're sinking two ships for one cannonball.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense.
You're right. You're right.
Hmm.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would report them too because I can't go to jail. I'm too me to go to jail. So they gonna have to figure it out, man.
Okay, okay.
I said too
Sample.
that those cases are some very serious cases, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't see no other choice but to do that.
And we know you sending them down for sure. Because you you don't play. You wasn't playing with the cheating, so definitely not this. Okay, so moving on. Thank you for all the responses. So KIDA provides three principles for ethical decision making. So number one, it ends based thinking. So philosophers refer to this as utilitarianism. Sorry about my pronunciation, everybody. Best known by the maxim: do whatever produces the greatest good for the greatest number. So based on cost benefit analysis, determining who will be hurt and who helped. At the heart of the principle is an assessment of consequences, a forecasting of outcomes. Two, we have rule based thinking. This is Kant's, oh yeah. So Kant's categorical imperative follow only the principle that you want everyone else to follow. So ask yourself, if everyone in the world followed this rule of action I am following, would that create the greatest good or the greatest worth of character? Rule based thinking is based firmly on duty, what we ought to do rather than what we think might work. Right? So this is deontological thinking, meaning based on moral obligation. So three, we have care-based thinking. So putting love for others first. So the golden rule is an example of care-based thinking. Do what others. Hello? Sorry, I think I dropped there. Right. So do what others would want you have to do to them. Sorry. Do what others. Hello?
We're hearing you.
Yeah, we
Okay, so I think I dropped another. Okay, so to do others what you would have them do to you. So care based thinking puts the feature of reversibility into play. So test your actions by putting yourself in another's shoes and imagining how it would feel if you were the recipient rather than the perpetrator of your actions. So these three principles can be applied in examining dilemmas as you begin to work through their complexities. So then you decide the right course of action. An effective approach is to use each of these three principles before planning or taking an action. KIDA further provides 9 checkpoints to use when faced with an ethical dilemma. Right, so consider the following situation. So you are a president of the college's Young Democrats or Young Republicans Club. Your group has discovered that an unflattering article about the club will be printed in the next day's campus newspaper. The club members begin planning a scheme to steal all the newspapers before the students get them in the morning. Using the examples of ethical decision making models, how would you approach the situation? What are the moral dimensions of the situation? Is it a violation of the constitutional right to freedom of the press or a violation of the school's honor code? Would you conceive the members not to execute their plan because they might get caught at the club and the club might lose its charter? What would you do if the members stole the papers? Anyone? Are you all not going to answer? You have to be interactive. Yes, you can, Niklan.
I was trying to give everybody else a chance, but the right
Mm-hmm.
course of action I would take is that I would try to persuade them to stop. But this is purely for the sake of the club because let me say that the article is published and it is negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be more beneficial for the club if we could prove otherwise, and it would look bad on the press, right? For publishing
Mm-hmm.
an article that have. But at the same time, if the members went through and they stole the newspapers, then they just confirming what was written in the article that there's negativity within the club.
Right. Yes. Okay, thank you. So the next one. Okay, so Aristotle's ethical principle. This is a picture of him here. I know you would have seen it before in the previous slide when Afia was talking. His ethical principle, which form the basis of leading an ethical life and serve as guidelines for doctors, psychologists, and counselors in particular, have been modified by several academics for the use in helping professions. Karen Strump Kitchener, an education professor, modified the five biomedical ethics principles put forth by Beauchamp and Childress for counseling. So, respecting autonomy, avoiding harm, helping others, being just, and being faithful are five ethical principles. These five principles, which are shown in exhibits, well, we can't see that here, sorry. So they were used as critical evaluative approach to moral reasoning and ethical decision making processes by members or leaders. These five ethical principles have numerous applications in organizational and leadership contexts. Applying these guidelines or to assist you in choosing the best course of action and influence of how your choices will impact other people. So these principles as follows. So we have one, we have respecting autonomy, providing leaders and members with freedom of choice, allowing individuals to freely develop their values and respecting the right of others to act independently. Autonomy, like constitutional rights and liberties, has conditions that and does not imply unrestricted freedom. A major assumption of autonomy is that an individual possesses a certain level of competence to make rational and informed decisions. Right, so number two, doing no harm or non-maleficence. Providing an environment that is free from harm to others, both psychological and physical. Leaders and members refrain from engaging in action which risk harming others. Three, benefiting others. So we are promoting the interests of organization above personal interest and self-gain. The notion of promoting what is good for the whole of the organization or community and promoting the growth of the group is upheld in the principle of beneficence. Or we have being just or justice. This is treating people fairly and equally. This principle is traced to Aristotle's work on ethics. 5. Being faithful or fidelity. That's keeping promises, being faithful, being loyal to the group or organization. Being faithful is a principle premised on relationships and trust. If you as a leader or a member violates the principle of fidelity, it is difficult or impossible for others to develop a trusting relationship. Right. So when faced with decisions in the workplace, they can be a useful tool. Your actions and your decisions may be influenced by a quick and informal decision making model known as the newspaper test. So before you take action or make a decision, consider whether you feel comfortable with your actions or behaviors being reported in the media. So with this being said, do you believe that your decisions will pass the newspaper test? Okay, and then to the next slide, we just have a summary of our chapter. So, since groups and organizations are made up of human beings do who can make mistakes, which is part of the learning process, developing into an ethical participant and creating ethical environments are complex processes that involve the moral development of an individual, the influence of role models, values driven leadership, and the organizational environment. One of the most important aspects of leading with integrity is raising questions about ethical issues. So, people who lead with moral purpose frequently have as many questions as answers. So, according to relational leadership model, moral leadership entails setting an example for others, involving others in the resolution of moral conundrums, acting morally to advance the common good, and approaching issues that lack obvious answers through a process. Our society is looking for trustworthy individuals who are dedicated to acting morally in both leadership and participation roles. Even though our world is chaotic and fast paced, moral leadership is essential to the leadership process. What would an organization, community, or the entire world look like if everyone worked to establish and maintain an ethical environment by rewarding moral behavior, having moral conversations, and carefully working together to use decision making models to resolve conflicts. It would be amazing. It would. And so that concludes our presentation. We sincerely appreciate your time and attention and all of your answers to our questions. We hope that it was enjoyable for you. And that's it. So